Welcome back to everybody. This is an exciting time, I think, for all of us. And there's nothing like the start of football season. Kind of just the atmosphere, the temperature of what's going on around the country. I think everybody looks forward to this time of the year, especially coming out of the lull from the sporting world in July. And so getting ready for football season is exciting. Clearly, we're excited about our team. I think that as we went through the off-season program of winter conditioning, spring practice, our summer training, I think that our team has built a culture that we're excited about. Clearly we like the talent on our team, but when you start putting that together with staff continuity, the veteran players on our roster, and then the influx of the newcomers, we've built something here that we're excited about. And ultimately, we have to go out and play, and that's what's going to define us is by the way we play and the way we perform. But I think we're set the stage for us to go out and have a really good training camp. We've got a lot of players that need to improve. We need to improve, holistically as a team on offense, defense, and special teams. And to do that, individual players have to improve along the way, and that's what training camp is for. We are definitely not a finished product before it starts. So there's a lot of work to be done, but to get ourselves to this stage with a football team that is healthy to practice, every guy in the roster will be available to practice that first day, which is good. And there's definitely a lot of excitement. I mean, I think that when you look at, the season ticket sales in June and being sold out in June, over 68,000 season tickets. I know our student tickets are on a record pace right now of what's to be sold. So I think there's a lot of excitement in the air amongst the program. I know DKR is going to be rocking every Saturday, and we're looking forward to that Labor Day weekend. So a lot to be fired up about, a lot of really good players coming back, a great staff coming back. Like I said, a lot of influx of new players that can help this team be even better. And then now it's time to put in the work. And so from that, we'll open it up.
Raise your hand if you have a question. We'll get a mic to you. Start right back here on the far left. Sam?
Steve, you guys have a lot of high expectations on you guys this year. I know you seem like you guys have embraced that. What, if anything, is standing in the way of this team accomplishing its goals?
The biggest thing that's standing in the way is, one, we haven't done it yet, right? And so we have to go earn it. You have to go do it. And then you have to do it with a level of consistency. And I think that that's something when we really evaluated last season and as we were getting ready for this training camp, one of the key messages to the team is going to be about there's a level of consistency that's needed to be a champion. And the way you work day in and day out, the way you perform week in and week out, that's critical to success. And that's something that we got better at. We were not perfect a year ago. We can't afford those lulls of where we can play really good offensive football and then struggle for 3 drives in a row where we just don't operate the way that I know we're capable of operating. So those are some of the things that we need to work on in training camp and really understand the value of practice, understand the value of preparation, and then the value of execution and how we get to that point. And so what stands in the way is us, and until we prove that, that's what's in the way. But I think that we've got a great mindset going into it, ready to work on those things to put ourselves in the best position that we can heading into the fall.
On your far right, Ed.
Coach, what position or positions you'll have to make some tough decisions this month before the start of the season? Position or positions you're going to look at really, really closely?
I think the part of that, Ed, is like almost all of them, because it's so competitive now. There's not such a discrepancy on our roster of high-level players and then this gap, right, between the next player at that position. I think that the players that have been in our program now for 3 years have gradually all improved, and they're at a really good spot. I think we've recruited well across the board at every position, and so it is going to be competitive. The natural one, just because of experience, I think running back is going to end up being a tough call as we get to that point. I think what we end up doing in the secondary is going to be unique and difficult. I think who plays next to Jalen Ford is going to be one. But again, I don't want to put a ceiling on. I know we're returning 5 starting offensive linemen, but that doesn't mean these other young guys that came in a year ago aren't going to push for an opportunity to play. And it's something that I was talking to the staff about yesterday. I know a lot gets made about, well, how do we perform better in the fourth quarter? I think part of performing better in the fourth quarter is playing more guys earlier in the game, so that we are more fresh in the fourth quarter. And I think we have the ability to do that now. I think that we're going to have a really comfortable, solid 2 deep. We're not going to feel that drop off when you want to play a guy in the first quarter and the second quarter to maybe save legs, so that we're fresh in the fourth quarter. And so it's going to be a healthy competition, I think, across the board. But just to name a few, the ones I touched on, I think will be interesting position battles as we go, because they're all talented rooms.
Thank you, and your left coach, Danny.
Steve, you've cited a couple times this offseason the staff continuity as one of the reasons why you think the defense played better last year. Was that as simple as those guys just kind of feeling each other out for a year? And, since all 5 of them are back, will that help improve more this year?
I think so. When you got to think, when I took the job here, I wanted to hire the best coaching staff that I could. And we took a little bit of an unconventional approach to getting the staff hired. I went and hired, Blake Gideon, Terry Joseph, and Bo Davis before I hired Pete Kwiatkowski as a defensive coordinator, and then hiring Jeff Choate. The only guys on that defense that had ever worked together were Pete Kwiatkowski and Jeff Choate, and that was really for a small amount of time. These other guys had never worked together. So not only did they have to get accustomed to PK's scheme and philosophy, but then formulating ideas, there's a lot of great expertise amongst those guys. And so there was definitely a learning curve, a feeling out process for them, I think, and some growing pains that we went through, especially in year 1. But as we grew together and as we started to develop the players that we had and then recruit, the type of players that we wanted at position, it all started growing together. And so I do think that staff continuity was critical going into year 3 now, where these guys are very comfortable with one another. They're speaking the same language. There's an expectation from the players of what's expected of them and how they're going to get coached. And so I think inevitably, that there's a level of comfort of what we're going to try to do and what we're going to try to go accomplish.
Stay over here, Thomas.
Hey, Coach, you talked about in the spring, you've always prided yourself on having a productive running game. With a relatively experienced quarterback and receivers, kind of inexperienced at running back, how tempted this year are you to lean more on the pass to set up the run than in years past?
Well, like I said a year ago, we didn't throw it well enough. I felt like we put a lot of stress on our running game a year ago. When we're at our best, we do throw the ball really well. And that run, there's games when the run sets up the pass, there's games when the pass sets up the run game, predicated on the opponent and the game plan and what we're trying to accomplish. And so, ultimately, there's going to be plenty of moments where we're going to probably throw the ball more and better than we did a year ago, or even our first 2 years here. But that's going to help the run game too. And so, very rarely have I gotten into moments where we've just abandoned, one side of the style of play that we have. There were times last year where we borderline abandoned the pass game and ran the football because that was the best thing for us. But historically, I referenced that 2019 team at Alabama. We had 4 first-round wide receivers and a first-round quarterback, and we threw the ball well, but we never really abandoned the run game. Najee was still very effective as a runner for us in that season. So, you still have to have balance, because when you have balance, you make the defense play honest. And so that's the goal going into the season, that we have the right amount of balance, but yet we take advantage of the players that we have and the scheme that we have in the passing game to really become the explosive offense that I think we all think we can be.
You're right. Terry?
Coach Sarkisian, you had shared before that you run this team like an NFL team. Can you give us some details of what the players go through as they're going through this program? What does it look like for them?
Well, I think we try to be really efficient with them and efficient with their time. You know, I think that, you know, anytime you're a Division I Power 5 football player, there's a lot of demands on these guys. When you start to think about, there's an academic demand of what's on them, you know, to go earn a world-class degree here at the University of Texas. There's a workout regiment, right, that holds them accountable from, you know, what they're doing in the weight room and on the field and running with Coach Becton and in the training room with the recovery. Then there's the scheme perspective of what we're trying to do and organize in that. And now more than ever, there's an NIL perspective that these guys have responsibilities that they have outside of here with the opportunities to earn money. And so ultimately we have to be really structured. We have to be very organized. And we have to make sure that the players embrace that in a way to let them understand that, man, we are trying to prepare you for what the real world looks like. And if you're fortunate enough to play in the NFL, time management is critical when you get to that stage of your career to get to your second contract and your third contract. So, you know, that we try to treat them like pros, but along the way we understand that they're not all pros, and they're definitely not all pros yet. And so everybody's at varying stages. And some of them, you know, need more support from us than ever. But ultimately, our job as coaches is to put our players in the best position to be successful in life. And that encompasses football, that encompasses recovery, that encompasses what they eat, that encompasses how they go to school, it encompasses time management, how they treat their teammates, how to become a better leader. And so we take a lot of pride in that. And ultimately, I think when the players do move through the program, they understand why we're doing what we're doing. And then when they move on and get to the NFL, they call back and say, Coach, I'm so glad we did X, Y, or Z, because I'm in a much better position today than maybe some of the other rookies that are in the program now.
Stay on the right, Dennis.
Coach, because you've done all the work the last 2 years as far as establishing culture and the guys are speaking the same language, terminology-wise, coach cohesion, all of it. Now, can you attack this preseason camp any differently because you've taken care of so much of that?
I don't know if we're going to attack it necessarily differently in a sense. You know, there's always points of emphasis that you adjust, and you like I say all the time, as coaches, you get what you emphasize. So if you want to make improvements somewhere, or you think a certain aspect of the game is going to be important to your team come the fall, you got to emphasize that. But ultimately, I don't know necessarily that we do it dramatically different, but I do think the emphasis on certain things and then the players understanding why it's a point of emphasis and then them having their conversations so that we can improve certain aspects of our game to become more of a complete team.
Sark, I know every part of this team gets evaluated in the offseason. So when you look at yourself and we look at the coaching staff, what do y'all need to get better at? Where do y'all see yourself after 2 years?
Yeah, I think that, you know, and what we were just talking about, okay, so you look at where were we not as good as we need to be. And I look at last year and I look at 2 years ago. It's okay. So if we're this really good game planning team and we got players buying in and preparing and going out and executing a plan for the first 2-3 quarters of the game, how do we get to a point to where we continue that and not have those lulls to where games are closer than maybe we would like them to be? That's the first part. The second part is then how do we execute in those tight games? And I think that we made strides as a staff a year ago of finding a way to do what we're doing well that day, to perform and to go win. And you know, whether it was the Baylor game, whether it was a Kansas State game, finding ways in those games to execute, to perform. But I'm always hunting to be better, and because ultimately, you know, change is inevitable. You either get better or you get worse in this game, as a coach, as a player, whatever that is. And so we always hunt for those types of things. You know, schematics are schematics. I never try to sit still. I never say, hey, this is our system and we're never going to do anything different. We're always hunting for those things to do better. I'm always hunting for ways to connect with our team from a cultural standpoint and developing great relationships to motivate our players. I'm always, you know, looking for ways to motivate the staff, to keep them engaged. And is my messaging right? You know, when you go through 12 months of looking back at your messaging, were those the right messages week to week to instill confidence in our players, but yet motivate our players to be the best that they can be. So that's a constant evaluation for me, and naturally, I'm my hardest critic. You know, I know you guys think you are, but I'm pretty hard on myself, and I'm pretty hard on myself on Sundays. You know, even after sometimes a great win, I'll look back like I could have done that different. Next time if this comes up, and I'll ask the staff, what'd you think about this decision here? What about this play call here? Would we do something different? Because I try to put as much in my bank, right, of tools to then be able to go pull from if and or when something similar comes up again. And so I self-evaluate a lot, and I'm very comfortable in doing that and talking about it because, hey, at the end of the day, I just want to be at my best for our players and to make sure that they have an opportunity to go achieve the things that I know they want to achieve.
On the right, Joe.
You talked about competition at all the different positions on offense. You bring back everybody but Bijan and Roschon. How much does having 10 returning starters affect some of these competitions, whether it be inside or outside?
Well, I think it's helpful. Because there's continuity amongst the players too, right? You get into an off season, you get into summer workouts, and there's player ran practices going on, and those guys are very comfortable, well-oiled machine of what do they need to do, how to do, and why to do. I think they're also very comfortable having been in the system of coaching up the younger players who maybe just got here, who are still trying to figure it out. And whether it's a Christian Jones or a Jordan Whittington or a JT Sanders or a Gunnar Helm, these guys who have such a knowledge base of the system that they can help younger players along the way. But also, they know that the younger players are hungry. You know, they didn't come here just to watch. They want to compete. But the biggest key that I think I've seen from on offense, those 10 guys that are coming back with a lot of experience, is they also recognize those younger players are going to help us win. And that takes a lot of kind of self-confidence, but it also takes a lot of humility. That it's not just about them and what they need to do. How can all of the guys on the offensive side of the ball find a role to contribute to our success? And that I think some of that they learned from Bijan and Roschon. You know, they were great examples of that, great ambassadors of that, to where they recognize, man, it's going to take more than just those 10, 11 guys that trot out the first time we take the field. There's probably going to be about 30 or so players on offense that are going to really help this team be the best team that it can be this fall.
In the middle, Chip.
Steve, can you talk about your philosophy on rotating receivers and with the influx of talent you have in that room now, if that means you rotate more this year? And is Gary Patterson coming back to help this season?
Yeah, so from a receiver standpoint, you know, quite frankly, we really only have about 8 scholarship wide receivers right now, and all 8 of them can play. Our job is to try to figure out the things that they do well, especially when you get past those first 4 or so that when we do put them on the field, especially early in the season, we're putting them on the field to have success, to do the things that they do well, while we're trying to work on their complete game of kind of that big toolbox so that they have all the different route combinations and things that they do. So, you know, historically, we've always had about a 4 to 5 man rotation at the receiver position. It's pretty typical of kind of that NFL model, where most NFL teams have about 5 receivers active. Some weeks you have 4, most of the times you have 5. That may adjust some a little for us this fall, especially early in the season. Till we can figure out, what guys are capable of and what that looks like. But in the end, our job is to put the best players on the field to give us the best chance to be successful. And that may change from week to week. That may depend on the game plan. That may depend on what's the personnel packages for that week that we feel most comfortable with. But going into it, my plan is to play probably a few more than we have in the past, but that remains to be seen. I've got a month to try to figure that out before we get to it. As far as Gary goes, Gary was a tremendous asset for us a year ago. He did a really good job with the program, stepped away at the end of the season. As of right now, he's not part of the program. We'll see where it goes from here.
On your right, Anwar.
Hey, Coach. Just kind of two questions. The first one is just simple one. Who jogs out with the ones at running back tomorrow? Even though I know you're going to try to be working in a bunch of different guys, but just who jogs out is simple. And then from an offensive line perspective, you had Cam Williams that came on really strong, and Cam, DJ Campbell. You got Hayden Connor, obviously back healthy. So can you just talk about that and trying to work in all those guys as for that position battle?
Guys that'll get reps with the ones tomorrow: Jonathan Brooks, Keelan, Jaden Blue, Cedric Baxter. I think all those guys will get reps with the ones. I think from a running back perspective, from an O-line perspective, I definitely want to see, the five that we've talked about that are returning. Where does DJ Campbell fit into that mix? Where does Cam Williams fit into that mix? Where does NATO fit into that mix? You have to give them opportunity. And so to do that creates a healthy competition, in that room, but because of who they have to block every day. There's some good defensive linemen they have to block every day too. So whether they're the ones, the twos, what that looks like, we constantly rotate those groups of guys on both sides of the ball to where they're going to get enough banked reps here through the first 2.5 weeks of training camp. We'll have a pretty good understanding of what it needs to look like come the first ball game.
Back in the middle, Nick.
Yeah, Steve, you just mentioned the wide receivers a little bit. I'm curious where Isaiah Nayer's at in his kind of recovery process and how you maybe envision him fitting into the offense this season.
Isaiah looks great. He's fully cleared, ready to go. He's been running well this summer. I think he's in a really good frame of mind. I really think the addition of Coach Jackson has been great for Isaiah. I think that connection, that Coach Jackson, he puts a lot of time into really connecting with his players, and he treats them in a way that I think the players respect, and that there's a level of maturity there that I think resonated with Isaiah, and a lot of credit to our training staff, a lot of credit to Isaiah. It's never easy coming off of a significant injury like that, but looking forward to having him back on the roster, and I think he's going to be an impactful player for us this fall.
Front middle, Jeff.
Sark, were there particular conversations or trips or activities that you did over the offseason to become a better coach?
The biggest thing I did this offseason was stay connected to our team. A lot of times in the summer, coaches go on vacations in July and do different things. We took the week of 4th of July off, and my wife and I took that week, but the rest of the time I was here with the team. I wanted to be at the workouts. I wanted to be at everything I could be at with them and stay connected to them. And that was probably the best thing I did. Outside of getting away, sometimes it's getting closer. And so I tried to get as close as I could to them on a daily basis.
Stay in the middle, Eric.
Coach Eric Henry, Horns 24/7. Just big picture now entering year 3. Could you talk about the construction and makeup of this roster? How close is it to one that you see a team that can compete for a Big 12 title?
Well, I feel comfortable with our roster. I think we're plenty talented enough. There's a lot of good football players on our team. I think there's a nice mix of veteran players on our team to go along with youth on our team and excitement. And historically, I haven't been able to say that. A year ago, I'd say, man, we have a really good team. We have a talented team, but we're young. I think this year, the experience that we have coming back to go along with the youth, I think there's a nice balance there. It's competitive. Ultimately, I like the leadership on this team, which is obviously very important as well, because we're going to get faced with adversity just like every other football team does. I think that we have the depth to withstand, injuries, which is always the challenge of a football season. Of injuries are going to occur, and sometimes there's better injuries than others that occur predicated on the position that they happen at. And I think for the most part, we can withstand that. There's a couple position groups I'd like to maybe have a little bit more depth at, but that's the way it goes. Year after year, you have that certain position groups kind of have more depth than others. But ultimately, I like our team, and I haven't shied away from that. And that's not, like I said, to be arrogant or anything. These guys have put in a lot of work. The guys that have been here have developed and improved. The new players that have come in are talented. Ultimately, we've been trying to build a team and not play as individuals, because the deal is teams win championships. And then with team success comes the individual accolades, honors, and awards. And so I think our team recognizes that, that we need to go play really well as a team. And we're not a one-dimensional team. And as I touched on with the staff yesterday, we can win a variety of ways this fall. We can win high-scoring games. We could win low-scoring games. We could win because our special teams are really good. We could win because we throw the ball well that day. We could win because we run the ball well that way. We could win because we create a bunch of turnovers and we got ball hawks in the secondary. So the beauty of it for me, probably the biggest excitement is I don't feel like we have to win one specific way every Saturday. I think we're very diversified. We're not one-dimensional. And depending on how complexions of games go, because every game takes on a personality of itself, I think we're very well equipped to go win a different styles of games, which I think as a championship team, that's what you have to have.
Sark, you've talked a lot this offseason about the focus of this group. Would you say throughout your career, whether as a player or a coach, the best teams you've been a part of have been player-led teams? And if so, do you see any of those same hallmarks early on with this group?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always I hate to say it, there's a little bit of it's kind of a cliche player-led, right? At the end of the day, I'm the head football coach, right? And I have to lead our football team. And our coaching staff has to do a great job of leading our players. But I do think there is something to be said about player accountability. And yes, there is player-led portions of that. Just to hand the reins to the players, that would, what'd they hire me for, right? And so ultimately, I think we all have to assume the responsibilities that we have to our success. And our players, I think, are assuming what their responsibilities are in that locker room, right, in their off-season training sessions, when it comes to practice, right, how to motivate certain guys. So I think they've assumed their responsibility. But ultimately, we all have a responsibility to that success. And so to me, that all falls back on our culture, right? I mean, I always say culture can beat talent, right? Culture and talent, that's tough to beat. And I think that that's something that we've developed now, that yes, we have talent and we have culture, and it's something that is kind of got some substance to it. And that there's a lot of credit to that goes to our players, because they have, like I've said, they didn't just buy into our culture. I think they contributed to it, our culture, and elevated it in a space that, as a coach, makes me proud when I see how our players interact with one another.
Middle, Roger.
Sark, you mentioned around the team a lot in the offseason. In the old days, you were getting rumors of how guys were working out on their own. Now you can see it. What have you seen from Quinn from the end of the season, his growth, his maturity, and where does he need to go in your eyes?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, you see the dedication the guys put in to his overall body composition. He really has bought into his diet. He's bought into the workouts. And that takes a lot of kind of discipline and dedication and focus. I think clearly he's in a great frame of mind of this feels like his team. I think he leads that way. You can hear how he talks to the team that way, and then naturally the overall understanding of the scheme and the system, to where going into year two, the nuances of what we're doing make more sense to him. He knows where to go with the ball when his first two reads on a play aren't there, that the instincts kick in as where's his checkdowns and how to get the ball out. A lot of those kind of little things that sometimes don't look glaring, but over time you have 4, 5, 6 plays in a game where where's my check down, or I can't move quite quick enough to escape that. They add up to those negative plays, and now you end up playing behind the chains, where hopefully we really minimize those negative plays and we stay ahead of schedule, because when he's ahead of schedule and he knows where to go with the ball, he's a really fantastic player. And so I'm very confident in kind of the space that he's gotten himself into heading into training camp. And now we need to take it to a whole nother level over these next 25 practices.
Time for two last ones, Kirk and then Tyler.
First of all, did you buy Arch Manning's card?
I did not. I don't have that much money.
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay.
But I will say this: I don't touch on it. I didn't mean to cut you off, Kurt, but I don't touch on our player NIL deals like that. But I do think what a cool notion, and the fact that it's supporting St. David's and what it all kind of played out to be. And hopefully everybody kind of took the time to research what that card was about and what it was supporting, because I do think it was a really cool deal.
Hope you make that much someday.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw Harbaugh's comment about Michigan. He said we may have 20 Wolverines drafted next spring. To get a feel for your roster and your talent level, do you feel like it's that mature that you could approach those kind of numbers?
What's the record for draft picks?
It's got to be Georgia or Alabama.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think Georgia had 15.
That seems a pretty optimistic number at 20. I've said this kind of over the last couple of years coming out of the NFL draft. I think if we hover in the 8 to 12 players drafted a year, that we've developed the program that I think we're all proud of, and the players that we're bringing in, the development of the player along the way, and then ultimately the team success that we're having. Because the NFL draft, whether we like it or not, still gets swayed by the good teams. If you're on a good team, generally you have good players and they're performing, and that's who the NFL drafts. But you have to do your part. You have to recruit them, you have to develop them, you have to play good football to make that happen. So if we're on average between 8 to 12 a year, that means we're doing something right. And so are there those years maybe where you end up with a 13, 14, 15 type year that I know Georgia and Alabama have had recently? Sure. But I think if we hover in that range, then we're probably doing something right for the long term and for the future of the program.
On your left, Bob.
Coach, question for you about the assistants that you did hire from off the field perspective.
Sure.
Could you go over those and maybe what they exactly brought that you saw and want to
Yeah.
utilize?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll start on defense. Payam Sadat came to us from Portland State in a guy that has had a really cool background in defensive football. He's a guy that's kind of been one of the pioneers of the old Arizona Desert Swarm flex defense, where there's historically provided a lot of pressure on the quarterback and created a lot of one-on-one matchups up front and a style of defense that way that I felt like, is that something we're trying to get better at? Well, if we are, how do you do that? You have to bring in people that have some background of it. And two, just when he was here visiting for a couple days, I really loved his rapport with our staff. And that, to me, we've put in a lot of time into developing that rapport over the last couple of years. So I want to make sure everybody that we bring in can only enhance that continuity. From a special team standpoint, bringing in Joe D. Camillus, what a wealth of knowledge and experience he provides. I think 32 years in the NFL, special teams coordinator, been on 2 Super Bowl wins, been around some great coaches, been around some great players. He's a guy that a year ago, Dave Brock was on our staff, who's now with Rutgers. Dave worked with us on offense and then worked with me on a weekly basis from a game management standpoint. Joe D's going to kind of assume some of that responsibility with me, but a wealth of experience and knowledge and just championship pedigree. Most recently with the Rams, Super Bowl champs, been a Super Bowl champ with the Denver Broncos. And so not only is he going to help with Coach Banks on teams, but also, like I said, with me from a game management perspective. And then we hired Paul Chryst, most recently head coach, University of Wisconsin. Coach Chryst and I go back some time. My time when I was with Norv Turner with the Oakland Raiders, obviously his time with Mike Riley, and the connection there with those two coaches, systematically style of play. I know a lot of people wouldn't think, they think of me in Wisconsin football of lining up in the power running game and the play action pass. We've kind of veered off in our own ways, but inevitably when you get at the core, there's a lot of similarities to what we do. And his NFL background, his time with the Chargers, and then obviously what he was able to do at Wisconsin and Big Ten Coach of the Years and championships. And so when you can get someone with that resume on board, and again, both those guys, Joe D, Coach Chryst, and Payam, great staff guys, great rapport with the staff, a lot of positive energy in the building. So we're extremely excited to have all three of these guys. I think they're going to be tremendous assets for us.
Last one, Will.
Hey, Coach. You just said that you were close to the team all summer and all spring. What are the themes that are starting to come to the surface that are coming from the players, and who are those players that are leading those themes?
Well, I think one thing, and I've said it before, I think this team's on a mission. They've taken this mindset of being on a mission. They've kind of adopted the John Wick mentality. I know that Quinn has touched on and Jordan has touched on, and that they've really focused. And I think that's probably the thing. It's like, man, they want to go do this. They want to be focused on the task at hand. I think that they've kind of assumed this mentality of embrace the hate. Like, we get it. We're the University of Texas. We get it. This is our last year in the Big 12. Well, we can sit there and be a punching bag, or we can go attack the people that we're going to play. And I think that they've assumed that responsibility to say, hey, we're going to go after everybody else too. And so I think that that's the right mentality to have.